Good evening, everybody. I am Zev Sherrill, Chair of the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West. We are the active government affairs arm of our federation, and we are the proud sponsors of tonight's Congressional Candidates Forum. As Jewish community leaders, we believe in the importance of civic engagement and hearing from public office candidates on issues of particular concern to our community. What makes tonight different from other forums is that our questions that we ask of the candidates are framed through a Jewish lens. We are a diverse people in terms of our political views and Jewish religious affiliation, but we are all inspired by the same Jewish values, and we care deeply about core issues like the U.S.-Israel relationship, the rise of hate and anti-Semitism, and the Jewish imperative to care for our community's most vulnerable. We've developed a list of questions which will be asked by Amy Patternight and Michael Elkinis, active leaders of our JCRC steering committee. Due to the limited time we have with each candidate, we've asked them to the candidates to deliver a short opening statement on why they are running for Congress and what their top 3 priorities are, and to limit their answers to the questions to 3 minutes that they're asked. It's now my pleasure to introduce Representative Mikey Sherrill. First elected to Congress in 2018, Representative Sherrill serves on the House Armed Services Committee, the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and the House Education and Labor Committee. She is a former naval pilot, attorney, and federal prosecutor, and she lives with her family in Montclair. Congresswoman, thank you for being with us here tonight. The floor is yours for opening remarks.
Well, thanks so much, Zev. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me tonight. It's great to be back with Metro West. I especially want to thank Linda Scherzer and her team for the great job they've done setting this evening up. Thanks again, Zev, and Amy and Michael for helping guide our discussion tonight. We're gathering tonight at a pivotal time for our country and for the world. The COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine have roiled the global economy, and those impacts are being felt right here at home, whether we're talking about inflation or the supply chain or gas prices. But this is also a time of great opportunity. I'm proud of the work I've done, along with members of the 117th Congress, to invest in infrastructure projects like the Gateway Tunnel, reduce healthcare costs for our seniors, and support our veterans, and to help bring the world together to support our friends and allies like Israel and Ukraine. We're taking concrete steps to bring manufacturing back to the United States, particularly for high-tech tools like semiconductors that are so critical for our supply chain. I'm also proud of the work we've done to shore up our relationships around the world, relationships that, quite frankly, took a serious hit during the Trump administration. The first time I went to Ukraine, I stopped in Brussels to meet with our allies, shore up those relationships, and bolster the strength of global support for Ukraine. During my trip, we stopped and paid our respects in Ukraine at the Babin Yar Holocaust Memorial on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. The massacre of over 33,000 Ukrainian Jews in Kyiv in 1941 was one of the deadliest mass shootings during the Holocaust. While scholars are still researching the scale of the Holocaust in Ukraine, they estimate at least 1.5 million Jews were killed there. This beautiful memorial was an early target of the Russians just days into the war. We must continue to aid the Ukrainian cause and not allow Putin's disregard for democracy, history, and human life to prevail. Russians attempted to mask their reasoning around invading Ukraine as a mission to root out Nazis in the country. When I spoke to President Zelensky recently about this on my last trip, he completely rebuffed their claim. He scoffed at the Russians attempting to paint him as a Nazi sympathizer given his Jewish heritage. In Congress, I've continuously pushed to hold Iran accountable as well for their malign activities and their support for terror, to come together with our NATO allies to hold Putin accountable and to strengthen our relationship with Israel. But there's certainly more work to do. We're seeing a disturbing rise here at home in anti-Semitism and other hatred. And the last few years have brought unprecedented threats to our democracy. I want each and every one of you to know how deeply committed I am to rooting out anti-Semitism and hatred, and I look forward to discussing with you how we can work together to bring it to an end. We've got a lot to cover tonight, and I want to get to the questions you have, so I'll wrap up here. But I just want to say again how glad I am to be here and how grateful I am to have groups like Metro West in our community. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Zev.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for being with us.
Go ahead.
An important ideal in the Jewish community is tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. Here at Jewish Federation, we work with a number of different organizations to provide for vulnerable individuals, senior citizens, Holocaust survivors, people with disabilities, and other overlooked groups. How will you fight for these struggling communities and embody this idea of tikkun olam if reelected to Congress?
Well, as most of you know, I was not raised Jewish, but I have loved the idea of tikkun olam from the first time I heard about it. And I think now more than ever, the idea of everyone having a responsibility to do what they can to repair the world is so important. During my time in Congress, one of my top priorities has been to ensure that our most vulnerable populations are supported. I've worked with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure we pass legislation to do just that. So, for example, a few months ago, I voted for and helped pass into law the Inflation Reduction Act, which will make sure our seniors and disabled community can affordably access the medications they need. This legislation caps insulin cost sharing at $35 a month and limits out-of-pocket spending on prescription drugs to no more than $2,000 a year, which will help ensure access to critical medication for those in need. The Inflation Reduction Act also extends health insurance subsidies under the Affordable Care Act to more families to help them afford coverage. This provision will expand health insurance access to 13 million Americans who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford care. We also worked in the Inflation Reduction Act to address climate change and make sure we're taking care of our environment as well, with one of the largest investments in our climate in our nation's history. Seniors are also most at risk of being targeted by scammers for money earned from many years of hard work. That's why I voted for multiple pieces of legislation that protect seniors from scams, including the TRACE Act, which was signed into law and has been working to combat the rise of illegal robocalls. Through the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen the important role that telehealth has played in making quality healthcare more accessible for individuals who previously have had a difficult time accessing it, like those in our disabled communities. That's why I've led multiple pieces of legislation to expand and protect future access to telehealth, like the Expanded Telehealth Access Act and the Protect Telehealth Access Act. I've also fought to make sure that our vital community services are receiving the federal resources they need. So this includes funding recently and sadly that I secured for the Mental Health Association of Essex and Morris. We've unfortunately seen the mental health toll that the COVID pandemic has taken on our students. So this suicide prevention service will be incredibly helpful to the mental health work that they do in our schools. One of the most difficult situations that I faced has been the mental health epidemic, and also the difficult situations that families with children with disabilities face, especially once they begin to age out of programs. So during my time in office, I've met with many leaders of organizations that provide service and resources, such as Rose House, ECLC, Lifetown, Cereso Kitchen, and Employment Horizons, just to name a few. So seeing the great work that ECLC does for the disabled community, but then the heartbreak of parents as their children age out of that school has been troubling. But to look at places like Lifetown and Rose's Place, where they're looking for group housing options and other ways to care for disabled adults, has been really important. So that's why this year I worked with Jewish Services for the Developmentally Disabled on a community project to fund technology improvements in residential group homes, day habilitation, and private residential settings, with the goal of providing greater independence and accessibility. The program will help individuals live independently and help JSDD meet the growing need for residential support services. This will impact residents in towns throughout Morris and Essex counties, and I look forward to getting this program through the House and the Senate by the end of the year. I have several more things, but I know we're short on time. So let's get to other questions. And then if we have time, then I'm happy to go into even more details about some of these programs, if that's what if the audience is curious about those, if that makes sense to you guys.
Thank you. Great. So moving on to next question. The overturning of Roe v. Wade means that reproductive rights and the right to an abortion are being rolled back in nearly half the states in this country. Where do you stand on the recent Supreme Court decision? And what do you say to women who feel that they've just been denied a constitutional protection that was law for nearly 50 years? And lastly, do you support Lindsey Graham's proposed legislation on a national abortion ban?
This is probably one of the areas that my opponent and I differ the most. And you're going to hear him say that he's pro-choice. But I can't agree that somebody who thinks Roe v. Wade was correctly overturned and who thinks that it's okay to put this decision in the hands of state legislatures, many of whom are now overturned, like fully banning abortion with no exceptions for rape, incest, or life of the mother, to the point that now we see 22 million women and counting, because we see more states acting in this area. 22 million women and counting have no access to abortion. So I don't think that is a pro-life position. I am certainly in no way for Lindsey Graham's abortion ban. And my opponent has said that's a good place to start a conversation. I do not think it is. I think that's a horrible place to start a conversation. I don't really think there's a conversation to be had about how we give this to states or how we ban it nationwide. I think the only conversations that should be taking place in this realm are conversations between women and their doctors. That's who I believe has the right to have these conversations. So anything I can do to protect that, to make sure we eventually once more have a constitutional protection for women's rights and freedoms, I will do. I'm already talking to pro-choice advocates on how we rebuild the edifice that was our constitutional protections across the nation. And I also want to make sure that any way we can do federal legislation will do. And I'm currently supporting Democratic pro-choice women running in the state at the local level. So here we can continue to build the bench in our state, because we know that if we don't take care to do just that, we could see our state legislature, if it flips from Democratic to Republican control, once more are working hard to undermine the current rights we have in this state. So I'm trying to do an all of the above scenario, but at its heart, I believe this is a constitutional protection women should have. No state should make that decision for them, and it should be a decision between a woman and her healthcare provider.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Quick reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A function. The next question. Anti-Semitism and hate crimes against Jews have been on the rise in this country by both the left and the right. Our institutions of higher learning have often been the front lines for toxic anti-Israel activity that crosses the line into anti-Semitism. Former President Trump signed an executive order that makes Title VI of his Civil Rights Act apply to anti-Semitic acts, taking aim at the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement that has generated much of the vitriol. Do you believe this order should be enforced? And in the most extreme cases, should federal money be denied to universities that don't properly support their Jewish students?
So we have worked on BDS legislation in the House to end some of this the global movement, which we've seen as being very anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist across the world. But certainly what we've heard from college campuses has been more concerning here at home even. I've had concerns from people in our district about anti-Semitism on college campuses from parents and students. Last year, I hosted a roundtable on anti-Semitism to brainstorm about what Congress can do. And our roundtable specifically included a voice from one of our young people So I could hear more about exactly what was taking place, and it was incredibly alarming. It crossed over issues of anti-Semitism, and certainly some of what was taking place was just incredibly horrible and shocking that a school would have somebody on the campus to talk about these views and give them sort of some credibility from an academic institution. Just a couple weeks ago, I heard again from a mother in Maplewood whose daughter experienced anti-Semitism on campus just for supporting the right of Israel to exist. It both breaks my heart and it infuriates me. And we've been trying to look into this issue specifically to understand how best to deal with it. It seems like some of the problem is a lack of understanding from students in these groups when they say they are banning anybody who supports Israel. They don't understand that they're talking about banning people who simply believe in Israel's right to exist in certain cases. So I do think education is part of the key, and that's why I passed so much legislation to try to get more education into our school system. You know, college is supposed to be a time for young people to expand their horizons, challenge their preconceptions, and benefit from diverse perspectives. So I really think it's my attending the Naval Academy with people from every single state in the nation, with people from some of our wealthiest schools and some of our most economically disadvantaged schools for my understanding of this country. So we want to have broad discussions, but that does not include discussions that are antithetical to the values of the United States of America. And anti-Semitism is completely against all of our values and norms. And we're seeing a trend across our culture and our ideological spectrum. People who, instead of learning from others and around them, simply become more and more entrenched in their own viewpoints. I think a healthy debate is essential to a productive education. We can be faced with ideas we find disagreeable, and we can learn to advocate for our views without shutting down those who disagree. But the anti-Semitism we're seeing on college campuses is simply against not just our values, but the very idea of higher education itself. So as you know, I've never supported BDS. I co-sponsored House Resolution 246, which passed House in the last Congress. This was an important resolution expressing strong support for Israel as a key ally of the U.S., but unambiguously condemning BDS. You've also heard me say it before, and I'll say it again, anti-Semitism has no home in our state or our country, and I'll always continue to fight to root it out of our society.
Thank you.
Thanks.
In recent years, federal support for nonprofit security grant funding has helped to address some of the security needs of New Jersey nonprofits and faith-based organizations. As you know, Jewish communities remain a primary target for terrorists, both domestic and foreign. The Jewish Federations of North America will be asking for an increase from $250 million to $360 million for fiscal year 2023. Will you support that request?
I've already supported that, so I was proud to fight for the funding, and I'm happy to tell you today that the House Appropriations Committee did allocate in the House, and I'll continue to fight to see it pass through the Senate and signed by the President, but allocated $360 million for fiscal year 23. That is $110 million in increase over last year. And yes, I was happy to fight for that. Many of our houses of worship and centers here use nonprofit security grant programs and the UASI Security Initiative programs. I've always fought to get more resources into those programs. And then, of course, after hearing from synagogues specifically on how important the NSGP program is to our communities, we've worked directly with the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness on outreach efforts for the program. This year, we hosted a webinar in the spring for potential applicants to hear from the agency and get answers to questions. And my staff is always happy to be a resource to organizations interested in the program. So I look forward to continuing to support these applications and trying to navigate the process. We're also happy if people don't get the resources that they need from this program to find out exactly why, what was going on with the application, and if there's anything we can do to help strengthen that application.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. So the Jewish and pro-Israel community is closely watching developments with Iran and the possibility of securing an agreement on a new version of the 2015 nuclear deal with the US and other powers. Do you think the Iran deal is the right way to prevent Iran's path to a nuclear weapon? And if not, what should the US and the world be doing to contain this rogue nation?
So one of my top priorities is preventing a nuclear Iran. It is without a doubt what's best for our national security and the security of our allies and partners in the region like Israel. But, and this won't be news to many of you, I've had my share of concerns about the JCPOA, and I've been glad to see the Biden administration has stood strong on issues like listing the IRGC as a terrorist organization, and they haven't backed away from that in the recent talks. But in the past week, the administration has confirmed that a new nuclear agreement is increasingly unlikely. And that's really the result of a number of factors: Iran's collusion with Russia in the war of aggression in Ukraine, their malign activities in the Middle East, including in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. But it's also a result of the Iranian regime's recent stonewalling and their unwillingness to meaningfully participate in good faith negotiations. In fact, when we were briefed in the Armed Services Committee, I know, and this has been publicly reported, that they have tried to prevent the IAEA from oversight over their nuclear program. That is really key to any sort of agreement. So now more than ever, with the young women of Iran standing up for their rights at unprecedented levels, it's critical we continue to work with our allies and partners to hold the Iranian regime accountable for their repression, their support for terror, and their regional disruption. I do believe a deal that balances accountability for Iran's malign activities with a strong, robust oversight regime with international verification mechanisms, and that's key, is the best way to ensure that Iran never gains access to a nuclear weapon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Politics in this country have become fiercely partisan and bitterly divisive. How do you propose to restore faith in our political system and reach across the aisle in the spirit of bipartisanship to tackle our nation's problems? And also within the party, in the Democratic Party, which has also become divided.
It is really difficult. So, you know, I sit on a bipartisan veterans committee called the Four Country Caucus, and I almost quit it in the aftermath of January 6th, because many of the members of that caucus did not support the certification of our elections. And so I was asked to stay on it and to continue to try to build those bridges. And quite frankly, I decided that if I was going to stay on in that group, I was going to speak my mind, because how else were we going to build understanding and bridges without those hard discussions? So we had some hard discussions. And, you know, I've stayed in the group, but it has been very difficult to find some of those bridges that we need to find to move forward. I was just, quite frankly, furious with some of my colleagues in the House recently who signed on to a letter talking about negotiating with Russia for an end to the war in Ukraine. And of course, we're happy to be a part of negotiations, but that is a Ukrainian decision. And that also, I felt very strongly, as somebody who's been to Kyiv several times, who works in the national security space, that letter truly undermined some of the gains that Ukraine has been making in the hope that that will bring Russia and Putin to the table. We need to stand strong with our allies, and I thought that letter undermined those efforts. So it is a constant work in process, and a lot of it, I think, takes kind of stepping back from your initial reaction, which is often one of anger, frustration, rage, because all of us, or most of us, are in Congress because we truly care deeply about our country and the people we represent. So when something goes contrary to our values in that area, there's nothing almost more emotional in your response to that sort of thing. And so, you know, you have to take a step back and think, what's best for New Jersey? What's best for the people I serve? What's best for America? And how can I best build those bridges and help, in many ways, bring us all together and unite us as a nation? How can I not be a force dividing us? But it is difficult. So I think rebuilding trust is one key thing. I want people to be able to trust me. I want them to know where I stand and who I'm fighting for. I was fighting for our district when I secured federal funding for Gateway, lowered prescription drug prices for seniors, invested in research and development to fuel our economy, mitigated flooding, expanded healthcare for our veterans, and much more. And many of these pieces of legislation, and I remind people of this all the time, we passed with a bipartisan Congress. In some of the most partisan times in our nation, we are still working hard for the American people on things like the infrastructure law and the CHIPS Act and the burn pits bill to help our veterans suffering from toxic exposure. And even, and this is kind of even shocking to me, the gun violence prevention bill, the first time we've acted in about 3 decades to address some key issues of gun safety. And I'll keep doing more. I'm not finished yet. But I guess I would just impart to everyone, and this is something I remind myself, I've served in every corner of this country. I've served in places like Texas and Florida. I've served all over the world, and I've seen different visions for what government might look like. And I can tell you that this country is a country of optimists because we know the potential of our country and the people in it. We know what our grandparents and parents built, and we know the potential of our kids. We're people who accomplish big things, but we can only do that together. So that's why I think it's so incredibly important that we all continue this work to build bridges, to try to understand what's driving some of the hate and rage and divisiveness. So hopefully we can meet that with things like hope and good legislation and kindness. I know that sounds like something you might hear in your kindergarten classroom, but sometimes that actually is what it takes at its core to reach across the aisle, to be the first one to reach across the aisle, to try to build these bridges and get better results for our country.
Thank you. And this is our last question before we go to some audience questions. This is your chance to set the record straight. During this campaign, has there been any information that has come out about you, and if applicable, your voting record, either by your opponent or by another source, that you would like to have the opportunity to clarify here this evening?
Yeah, so my opponent has put out a lot of false statements about my record, and he's chosen to say that I wasn't at times a federal prosecutor, claiming I never tried a case, which is odd because that's clearly verifiable. I filed a lot of federal court documents. He's also lied about my finances, which actually is troubling because he says that I got I think as he put it, uber rich during my tenure as a congresswoman, which is just untrue. My finances are public and can be found on clerk.house.gov. But I also hate that he's sort of, in that way, undermining people's faith in our government. When you hear from my opponent, he'll say that I'm lying about his position on abortion. But I really, truly, as I stated, feel that if he believes the Supreme Court was right to overturn Roe v. Wade, and that is what he said, and if he believes this is a states' rights issue, and that is what he said, that he supports the fact that, as I've stated, 22 million women and counting in this country have been stripped of their rights and freedoms. And state legislators across the country have and are planning to ban abortion with no exceptions. So I don't think that's a pro-choice stance. I don't think that protects women in this country. I don't think that protects women in New Jersey who leave New Jersey. And so I am going to fight again and again and again to continue to fight for federal protections for women's freedoms. And I don't believe he will.
Do you think there will ever be a middle ground on abortion, or is it always just going to be all or none? Can there ever be a middle ground?
I guess what strikes me and what was really problematic even in the Roe decision was that these are such complicated cases. And so it seems hard to find that middle ground when, are you going to say you can't have latent pregnancy abortions? Well, I was just reading about a woman who was pregnant with twins, and because of some abnormalities in one of the fetuses, that fetus was actually harming the healthy fetus and was also harming the health of the mother. And so had she carried both babies to term, one of them would have died on the table, but also possibly the other baby would have died as well. And her health was being put at risk. So that's, so if you ban late term pregnancies, you're saying that those horrible, horrible kinds of situations, those complications can't be addressed between a woman and her doctor. And in many cases, there's no exceptions. There's no way to address that. We see in Ireland, a state, a very Catholic, traditionally Catholic state where I think, it was a surprise when women got abortion rights there. And it's because a woman was forced to deal with a miscarriage. She got a staph infection and died from it. So not only did the baby she was unable to abort die, but she died because she couldn't get proper medical care. And we're hearing stories like that in Texas now, where women who are having miscarriages are being turned away from hospitals because doctors are afraid to treat them. So I have not, I think I am one of the members in Congress most likely to find middle ground on issues. I find it hard to see a middle ground that is going to get good healthcare outcomes for women, other than allowing this to be between a woman and her doctor.
Thank you.
So, gentle reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, please put it into the Q&A. The first question from the audience, can you speak to the Jewish value of welcoming the stranger and countering the stereotyping and persecution of immigrants by reviving our dormant asylum system and reforming our punitive immigration policy?
That's such a great question. And I remind people all over the district, and I know this group knows this, that our asylum laws were in many cases written in the wake of the United States turning away Jewish people fleeing Hitler. And so I believe deeply that we have a moral responsibility to adhere to our asylum laws. But if we are going to do that in a humane way, we need to have a comprehensive immigration plan. So we need to have resources at the border. We need to have processing facilities so people who come to our border are not detained for months or even over a year at a time as we wait for them to be processed. We need to make sure that we're addressing some of the root causes, like the international criminal syndicates that flourish in some of the Northern Triangle countries. There is a reason that we see 12-year-olds arriving alone at our border after horrible journeys. The only reason a mother would do that is if the life at home was so much worse. So we need to address those international criminal syndicates as well, not just because of that, but also because of so much of the human trafficking and crime that goes on at our border generated from them. We need to make sure that people who are here, people who have paid taxes into the system, have a pathway to citizenship, that DACA recipients have a pathway to citizenship, that TPS recipients have a pathway to citizenship. That is the deal that passed through a bipartisan Senate in 2013. And that is largely the understanding, I think, of most people in the nation of what true comprehensive immigration looks like. So it is one of the areas I find most frustrating, that the extremes of both parties seem to be unwilling to come to the table and negotiate these things, and put so many lives at risk because of it.
Okay, we just have another question back to Roe v. Wade and pro-choice. If you are pro-choice about supporting the women who want to keep their babies, on your example of the twins, was not a C-section a choice rather than aborting the baby? I'm not quite sure I understand the whole scope of the question. If you are pro-choice, what about supporting the women who want to keep their babies? On your example of the twins, was not a C-section a choice rather than aborting the baby, but I think you said it was one was already compromised and was harming the other. But go ahead and you take it.
I believe for the health of the other child, continuing to carry the healthy child was the best option in that case, from what I understood from reading about it.
Was this
So not having an immediate C-section for both of the fetuses, but instead aborting the one who, that wasn't viable, but harming the other fetus, but then carrying the other fetus to term so that that fetus would be healthier.
Was that in New
Was
Jersey?
my understanding.
Do you know
No,
if it
that was in Texas, and that was pre the overturning of Roe. So today, that option, which resulted in a healthy pregnancy for that mother, would not have been an option.
Great. Thank you. The next question is if you can speak a bit about the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Some of the issues, whether it's Israel or some of the other issues, are counter the more moderate wing of the Democratic Party, and I would love your thoughts on that.
So some of the issues of the progressive wing of the party that are countered by the moderate wing of the party, is that the question?
So for example, on a BDS, on Israel, and obviously some other issues as well.
Sure. So Israel has been and is a very bipartisan issue in Congress, and has a great deal of support throughout the Democratic caucus, including in our leadership. And we passed the memorandum of understanding out of the House Armed Services Committee, of which I'm a member, and that has been run by Democrats throughout the last two Congresses, because we've been in the majority, and we've had no problem passing the memorandum of understanding out of the House Armed Services Committee, passing it out of the democratically controlled Senate Armed Services Committee, and then sending it to the president's desk and getting that passed. So we have seen, we have seen the ability to largely have our agenda to support our ally. We've been able to get that passed. So we've also resupplied the Iron Dome in Israel, which we were able to get through our Democratic Congress as well. And I think we've seen some great support for a lot of the initiatives that we want to do. And I'll tell you just from personal experience, I've had some an amazing trip to Israel with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's been a leader. I just was texting earlier today with Brad Schneider about my race, who's been a true leader in this area. And I think we see some of the strongest voices coming from our party, and really thoughtful voices on this issue. I'm sad to say we're losing Ted Deutsch. He's going on to greener pastures. Unfortunately, we'll lose him in the caucus. He's also been a wonderful voice, although we get in fights about who likes Bruce Springsteen better. And I feel like since I'm from New Jersey, it's obvious. But I find that in my caucus, there are quite a few allies that I can always find to push back against things that I think are wrong-headed coming out of the left wing of my caucus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for those questions. Congresswoman Sherrill, we want to thank you for joining us tonight and speaking with our community. We also want to thank you for your support of our community during your 2 terms in Congress, helping advance important legislative priorities and standing with us on multiple occasions to denounce rising anti-Semitism and hate. We wish you the best of luck in the upcoming election. We're now going to take a 3-minute break and come back with Paul DeGroot, the Republican candidate for Congress in New Jersey's 11th Congressional District. Again, a 3-minute break. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Everyone, welcome back. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Paul DeGroot, the Republican candidate running for Congress from New Jersey's 11th Congressional District. Nice to meet you, Paul.
Good evening.
Born and raised in Clifton, Paul worked for the Passaic County Prosecutor's Office in a career that spanned 25 years. He was involved in over 100 trials and closed thousands of cases, eventually being promoted to chief prosecutor for the homicide, narcotics, and government corruption units. A lifelong Republican, Paul lives with his family in Montville. Paul, before I ask you to give your opening remarks, I want to tell you a little bit about us. As you know, the sponsor of tonight's forum is the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West, which represents about 200,000 Jews across 5 counties. We are a diverse community, especially in terms of our political views and Jewish religious affiliation. But we are all inspired by the same Jewish values and care deeply about core issues like the US-Israel relationship, the rise of hate and anti-Semitism, and the Jewish imperative to take care of our community's most vulnerable. We truly appreciate you being with us tonight to discuss the issues we care about. The floor is now yours for opening remarks, followed by Q&A led by our 2 panelists.
Okay. I hope you don't mind if I refer to notes every now and then. I'm not using a script. I'm just, glancing. But good evening, everybody. My name is Paul DeGroot, and you're right, Zeb. I was born and raised in New Jersey my entire life, which is very important to me because I like to say, not to be cliche, but I'm a Jersey guy. I understand the problems of the area, and being born and raised in Clifton, I was very close and connected to Passaic County, which has a large Jewish population. My pediatrician was a member of that community. And that is where I stand from. I'm a Jersey guy. I know this district, and I was born and raised here. My father was a firefighter in Clifton. I was born in a blue-collar union household. And I really want to be challenged by you regarding what type of Republican am I? I like to say I'm truly a different type of Republican for CD11. And that's important for everybody to understand, not to accept commercials that brutally attack my position or brutally attack me, but to hear it from me right here tonight and to get the word out about how you judge who's telling the truth, who's deceptive. As a trial prosecutor, I think that's important. You have to judge the character and the person. I would have loved to have this conference and debate in person, where you really get to see me. But being raised in Clifton, I went to public schools. I value a public school education. I had a wonderful education. I wish I was a better student. But the values taught to me by my father, who was a firefighter, my mother, who was a homemaker, are hard work, dedication, and caring about others. When I entered this race, one of the things we talked about was what's the theme of your candidacy? And it really emboldens and is my my topic and what I care about. It's PaulDeGrootCares.com. And when you go to my website, it's about things that I'm concerned about. PaulDeGrootCares.com, because that's one of the things I was taught about by my father. My father was, help others. And I'd like to just set 3 examples for you. When I was a child, when I was young, when I was middle age, and when I was older. When I was young, one of my friends who was at my initial fundraiser event was drowning out in Montauk. And I was 17 or 18 years old, and Ken Kostler was his name. And he told the story about how he went under the water, sucked in the cold, salty water, and looked up at the emerald sky, which was the green sea above him. And he thought, I'm done, I'm dying. He got dragged out by the undertow. And all of a sudden, when he pushed off from the bottom of the floor of the ocean, and he popped up one more time. And that's when he said he really panicked because he didn't know what was happening. And there was an arm that came across him. That arm was mine. And he didn't know what was happening. He started to panic. And then he heard the voice that said, Ken, stop panicking or we're both going to drown. And that was me. I did what I had to do, and I always will. I see a problem, I'm there to help. I didn't care about what other undertow. I knew I was a strong swimmer, and I knew that I had to save my friend. Other examples were 9/11. When I felt helpless watching the planes and the TV, I was at work that day. When I felt helpless in 9/11, and I saw the plane crash on TV, and the previous one had crashed when it was on, I heard it on the radio, and I went to the 7th floor conference room, and I saw what was happening, and I felt helpless. And my friend Bill Purdy and I, we decided we have to do something. And I know that the theme of tonight is you want to know how I was involved. And my friend Bill Purdy and I, we volunteered for the Red Cross. We decided to help. And from work, we went to North Bergen, we got U-Haul trucks, and we took supplies down to ground zero, close enough within a 1 football field to see the mass of twisted metal, concrete, and the smell of burning insulation. And we delivered supplies to ground zero and to the surrounding staging areas. And I did that when I was a prosecutor. And it was surreal because I did it after work, and it went from night to sun up and then back to work, and I did it again. That's another example. On a more personal level, when I was dating my wife, I saw a cab driver being robbed and assaulted in New York. And that cab driver was being pushed into traffic and he was being assaulted. And I chased down the robbery suspect and I held him for police. Did I care about my safety? Did I say anything? No, my father was incensed that I did that. How silly, how stupid could I be? But I did it because it was the right thing to do, to help. And that's the reason I got into this race. The past 2 years, yesterday, my opponent had said, yeah, they've been tough years the past 2 years. She's right. They've been really tough years. And I entered this race because I want to help. I'm a different type of Republican. I believe in unions and union negotiation. I believe in the expansion of Medicare if we cut spending. These are kind of odd for Republicans to say, I think you would imagine. But I have a different idea of where this district should be. And this district is multicultural, is multi-generational. We have a variety of people and issues that we have to address. And the country for the past 2 years has been off track. We need to get back on track, and we need to take care of our seniors, our young people, businesses, America in general. And we need to make, in the most overtaxed state in the nation, we need to make this a better living area. CD11, I don't want to be governor. I don't want to be senator. I don't want to be president. All I want to be is the best damn congressman for the district in CD11. And that's what my focus will be on. I'd like to point out that I was endorsed by Rodney Freeland-Eisen, someone who's held this seat for 24 years, being very mature, solid, calm, and he negotiated and he got things done in Congress that I want to do too. I will cross the aisle to work with anybody that will help CD11 maintain, increase their jobs, lower the prices of food and gas and taxes. New Jersey is a tough state to live in. I'll work with Governor Murphy. I'll work with local politicians, anything to do to bring back better government.
Thank you. Michael.
So thank you, Paul. My name is Michael Elkinis. I'm one of the members of the JCRC steering committee. For the first question, an important ideal in the Jewish community is tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. Here at Jewish Federation, we work with a number of different organizations to provide for vulnerable individuals, senior citizens, Holocaust survivors, people with disabilities, and other overlooked groups. How will you fight for these struggling communities and embody this idea of tikkun olam if elected to Congress?
Well, I think I gave you 3 examples of the type of person that you would have in Congress. And first, I will be available to everybody in CD11. I will have an open door. I think you can appreciate the craziness that I did when I put my own personal cell phone on my business card. And that's to encourage people like yourselves to call me and talk about serious issues, things that they're concerned about. 98% of the time, that has worked out wonderful, with 98% of the people giving me advice or asking me questions. There's only been 2% that I would say we were a little bit difficult conversations. But it's been a wonderful experience, and you're going to get that type of person with the stories that I told you, and they're true stories, they're real. In my job as a prosecutor, and I have to tell you too, I'm a father of a 4.5-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. And my wife has a story all her own that I would like to tell you when you ask me about what is her story. She's a wonderful mom, beautiful woman, a successful businesswoman, and we're raising our 2 children in district. I've lived here all my life. Sharon moved here, and we are living in the community of Montville. But my job epitomized me. Some people say their job was their life. My job was an extension of my life. My life has always been to help. My job allowed me to do just that. Through the Passaic County Prosecutor's Office, 25 years I worked helping victims. I volunteered a lot. It wasn't I didn't do things that were required. I did things that were helping people. Some examples. We did a project called Helping Hands. Helping Hands is probably something that most of you have not heard about, but being a prosecutor, I like to say I'm a tough as nails prosecutor. I was chief of homicide, I was chief of narcotics, and I was chief of government corruption. So I put bad people away. I put murderers away. I put drug dealers away. I put government officials away who were stealing from the very people they were supposed to help, the public. In that job, it allowed me to do a lot of things. Helping Hands was one. When I was chief of narcotics, we came up with the idea, listen, we're arresting buyers. We're arresting people that are polluting society with their drugs, heroin, deadly disease, laced with fentanyl, even deadlier. I'm the only candidate that's taken drugs and guns off the street, really taking guns and drugs off the street. I'm the only candidate that's dealt with wiretaps and took 16 kilos, took 16 kilos of cocaine coming into Morris County from Passaic County, and we recovered about $1.3 million in seized proceeds. It's somebody that cared all his life and all his career. I took the 4:30 in the morning phone call about search warrants. I took the 4:30 in the morning phone call about a young girl shot in the head or a young girl killed or a child killed. Helping Hands was an opportunity for me to show something different. We arrested buyers and took them off the street, and we gave them the opportunity of in-house treatment, inpatient treatment, or go to jail. And from my memory, everybody took that they wanted treatment. This was a way to try to solve the addiction crisis that is going through Patterson. I worked in America's top 100 most dangerous cities, and that was something that we did. We also did programs on human trafficking. The border right now is a sieve. It is a leaking sieve. People come across without any vetting, and there are drugs flowing across the border. There are human trafficking coming across the border. At one time, I was human trafficking czar of our district. And there is human trafficking that goes on in New Jersey. It's not the same as Florida, where people are used in indentured servitude, slavery, picking vegetable crops and doing manual labor. Here it might be working in a restaurant. Here it might be living to pay off your debt of how you came to America. But there is human trafficking, and New Jersey has it. It is also represented on Route 3 Route 3 with prostitution in Clifton and in districts around this area. But we've done human trafficking. We did human trafficking seminars. We did human trafficking investigations. We worked on those things to help break that bind of slavery by these people, and many of them young women.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump in because we have so many questions and we want to get to everything tonight. Hi, I'm Amy Patternite. I'm a member of the JCRC steering committee as well, and also a resident of District 11. The overturning of Roe v. Wade means that reproductive rights and the right to an abortion are being rolled back in nearly half the states in this country. Where do you stand on the recent Supreme Court decision? And what do you say to women who feel like they've just been denied a constitutional protection that was a law for nearly 50 years? And do you support Lindsey Graham's recent proposed legislation on a national abortion ban?
Excellent question. And I know I wanted to answer this, and I want to be clear on this. I am for a woman's right to choose. In this election coming up, you must judge credibility. As a prosecutor, you must judge credibility and motive and evidence. The motive to lie about my position is for my opponent to get elected. The credibility, once I pierce this credibility and she says one thing and I'm telling you something else, you judge my credibility whether I'm telling the truth. And if you deem me to be more credible, then you must deem her to be not credible and false. I am telling you from now on, I have always been pro-choice. I always am pro-choice. I will always be pro-choice. I have a 2-year-old daughter. I do not want to take that away from her. I have lived in this district my entire life. Roe v. Wade was the law of the land. It is no longer the law of the land. The Dobbs decision has changed that. It is a states' right issue, and we must accept that. And it is for New Jersey and other states to determine their path. My opponent has said some personally, morally offensive, disgusting, and outrageous things about my position. I am for a woman's right to choose. I think it is insanity that exceptions for rape and incest, she says I'm against those exceptions. I think it's insanity for any state not to allow exceptions for rape and incest. I am for exceptions. I am for a woman's health and for fetal viability. So my opponent, she stands with New Jersey law 100%. She stands with New Jersey law that even a viable fetus at 9 months is aborted on demand. My opponent says that parents have no rights in this say, and that they don't have to be notified or part of the process. I want to be part of the process with my daughter. If something happens, I will always be there for her. I don't want to be left out. I'm a parent. I have a deep love for children. That is where I stand, pro-choice with exceptions, and also concerned about the health and safety of the woman and of the child. My opponent is extreme in this position. She accepts and embraces a 9-month abortion of a viable fetus. My opponent does not want parents to be involved. I will always be someone that looks toward compromise. In Europe, there are many different forms, and across the state, 12 weeks, 13 weeks, 15 weeks. There are people with exceptions, people with no exceptions. There are a variety of things that people can discuss. What I tell you is this: the Dobbs decision puts it in the state's hands. My opponent talks about making it a law, allowing abortion. The other side, and I say the other side because I'm not in lockstep with the Republican Party. I never was, I never am. I'm a Republican, but I'm my own Republican. I'm independent. My opponent, the other side, says they want maybe to outlaw abortion or codify it. 50 years later, we have never codified abortion or choice. And do we really want a world where one side gets the presidency, the Senate, and the Congress and makes it, we want pro-choice, and the other side gets the presidency, the Congress, and the Senate, and they go, nope, we're flipping that. We want to make pro-life. Do we want that type to go back and forth? I think a conversation is important to have. Can we come to an agreement? I am not going to codify pro-life. I'm not going to codify pro-choice. I believe that violates the SCOTUS decision of Dobbs. I represent CD11 and only CD11. And in CD11, I am no more than a voter. It is up to the people of CD11, the governor, the assembly, the Senate. But it is the law of the land, and New Jersey has chosen its path. And I'm not out to change New Jersey's path. I am a voter in New Jersey. And as Congress, I represent CD11 and I represent New Jersey.
Right. Actually, your opponent said a few moments ago that she believes it's the right between a woman and her doctor. But could you answer the question if you support Lindsey Graham's recent proposed legislation? Based on what you said, it doesn't sound like you would, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I've often said, and I always said that this would be a starting point as far as the discussion. My own personal research, and I said it on the campaign, was that I have determined that there's some genetic conditions that cannot be determined until 20 weeks. I read it, I researched it, I read a lot, and I'm aware of that. And being aware that there are some conditions that cannot be determined, I have said that maybe 20 weeks would be a starting point for that discussion. As I said, many countries in Europe have bans at 13 weeks, 15 weeks, 16 weeks. Europe, a lot of times, is put out as, oh, we should be like Europe with social medicine. We should be like Europe on this. America is only one of 6 countries that allow abortion to the 9th month. China and North Korea are 2 of those others. So I am the moderate in this position. I am the compromiser. I am the independent in this position. And that's my stand.
So you are supporting Lindsey Graham's proposed bill, or you're as a starting point, or I don't know, am I getting a yes or no out of this, or?
I said that a discussion is healthy. I'm not supporting Lindsey Graham's bill. A discussion is healthy. We should have it. Do you want to solve, Amy, would you want to see this solved with a compromise? Or do you want to see it going back and forth as the whim of each party? So I think a discussion is always healthy, but I am for choice. Let's be clear. I am for choice. I do not want to take it away from my daughter. I don't want to take it away from any woman. And I will, in New Jersey, I represent New Jersey. I represent the will and people of CD11. I am not anything more powerful than a representative of CD11. You tell me, and the voters of CD11 tell me what you want me to do, and I will listen, and I will always represent you. Whether it's getting more funds for police officers, whether it's getting flood mitigation, I'm only working for you.
Well, thank you. As a mother of two daughters, I appreciate that. We have just a quick question that relevant from the audience. Have you ever contributed to any pro-choice organizations such as Planned Parenthood?
I have not contributed to Planned Parenthood, but I said I am pro-choice. I've not contributed to the NRA, and I'm not a member of the NRA, but I own a handgun. So that kind of sets up. I don't really join organizations or groups based on. I donate to a lot of things. I donate to a lot of research and a lot of things that care deeply about me. Cancer research. I donate to, my mother had a stroke. I donate to that, and she passed away. I donate to anything that local PBAs, local animal shelter. The Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts. But that one issue, no, I have not donated to the Planned Parenthood.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So switching gears a bit, anti-Semitism and hate crimes against Jews have been on the rise in this country from both the left and the right. Our institutions of higher learning have often been the front lines for toxic anti-Israel activity that crosses the line into anti-Semitism. Former President Trump signed an executive order that makes Title VI of the Civil Rights Act applied to anti-Semitic acts, taking aim at the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement that has generated much of the vitriol. Do you believe this order should be enforced? And in the most extreme cases, should federal money be denied to universities that don't properly support their Jewish students?
I'm in this campaign. There were many people that were taking on the testing the waters or in the race. I think Jonathan Cohen and Charlie Cohen, they noticed me early on when I was the only person to say from the very beginning, Israel is extremely important to America. I support Israel and I support the Jewish population and in general. The movement that you're talking about is disturbing. I would always stand with Israel. I would stand against defunding and the movement that wants to divest from Israel. I am for the Jewish population. I'm for Israel. They are our best and only true friend in the region of the Middle East that we can always rely upon. And we clearly see that there are problems with other countries which are false friends, fake friends, like friends. So I will always stand with making sure that free speech rules, that support of Israel is present. And I do not want to see colleges divesting of their investments. I believe strongly in our friend Israel.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Politics in this country have become fiercely partisan and bitterly divisive. How do you propose to restore faith in our political system and reach across the aisle in a spirit of bipartisanship to tackle our nation's problems?
Wonderful. I'm the first time out of the box, and I won the primary, and I'm here today. And I won it because I am independent. My support is organically built. It is from friends and people that believed in my message. It is not from outsiders Wall Street, Hollywood, big tech. And it's been tough. It's been tough, but I believed in my message as an outsider. In 2018, I looked at the races in 2020. This is 2022 now, and I will work, as I said before, I'll work with Democrats. They're not my enemy. Republicans, I'm not going to be lockstep with the Republican Party. Whatever is right for CB11. If it's infrastructure and building the tunnel, so be it. I was for that. If it's bringing veterans more veterans, a veterans center in Morris County, like they have in Secaucus, it hasn't been done. I'm for that. If it's expanding Medicare so that our seniors can have better treatment, such as hearing, dental, and vision covered by Medicare, the basic plan, I'm for that. We have to cut spending, but I'm for increasing that. Was born and raised in a union household. I've met with unions. I've met with veterans. I've talked to veterans and unions. I've met with private industry, Murata industry, and I talked about what they care about. The unions talked to me about a path of citizenship for illegal immigrants that are working, the carpentry and the electricians and the plumbers. And they talked to me about what can we do to give them a path to legal citizenship. How can we make them working members of the society and of the country? So I will talk to the unions. I will work with that type of theory, that type of practice. I'm not going to shut my door just because it's your other side. I don't think you'll find my voting pattern in lockstep with the current administration. I'm not going to vote 99% with Joe Biden. I'm going to vote what's right for CD11. I'm independent. I retired from the prosecutor's office, and I was fortunate. I know others don't have it. I have a pension and I have medical benefits. That allows me not to seek a higher office or a different job. If McCarthy wants to put me in the smallest office in the darkest part of the Capitol, of a House building on the bottom floor, he can do it because I really just want to serve CD11. You come to me with a problem, I'm working on a solution. I met with the people at Picatinny Arsenal, our largest employer in Morris County, and I talked about they are always under the threat of being cut. And Picatinny Arsenal has so many routes into other areas. It goes throughout the state regarding housing and companies that rely on Picatinny Arsenal existing in this district. And I will always work for them and be there.
So one question, and thank you to the audience who have now sent a lot of questions for you. I'm going to try to put 3 or 4 of them together in a coherent way. So you've mentioned, and obviously we appreciate your candor on this, pro-union, where you'll work with the unions, expand Medicare. You want to work across the aisle, which is all wonderful things. There's a wing of the Republican Party, specifically the Jim Jordans of the world, the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world, etc., who believe Biden didn't win the election, and in a lot of ways has not shown a willingness or an ability to walk across the aisle to work with colleagues. What are your overall thoughts on that, and where do you stand, first of all, on the election itself? Did Joe Biden win? And second of all, how do you navigate the waters of the Republican Party to better work with the Democratic Party?
Okay. Yesterday at a debate, or was it actually on Sunday, I was asked what leader would I emulate in Congress, and what congressman do I look up to? And my answer was, I don't know, because I don't consider it a question. I'm my own man. I'm my own party. I'm going to be my own boss. I'm not going to be anybody else. I don't know. I know the people that you're talking about. Joe Biden is my president. The election is over. This is not about President Trump anymore. This is about Joe Biden and the horrendous policies that this administration has put us under. First thing he did was to cut off the Keystone Pipeline and cripple us in energy. That is causing inflation to go up, gas prices, food prices. When we're energy independent, and I believe in green energy, it has a place. I've camped across the nation. I took an 8-week camping after law school, and I saw the beauty of national parks. And when we're energy independent, we are a freer and better country. We are the shining light. Everybody looks to us. And when we're energy independent, our prices are lower, gas prices go lower, inflation goes down, food prices go lower, our allies are safer, and we're a more secure country. Joe Biden and people that support him, he just drew down on our strategic reserves. Our strategic reserves, this is an economic problem. This is an economic crisis. It is not a military crisis. Our strategic reserves should not be used to lower the price of gasoline a few pennies. That's ridiculous. I'm against that. I'm against the ridiculous spending. But talking about what you just said, Joe Biden's my president. I've said it from day one. I never questioned it. He is the president. The election is over. We've got to move forward. And if we're talking about getting back together, I think you've heard from me. If we're going to talk about working together, which I really want, it's got to happen between Republican and Democrat. We've got to move on. Trump is no longer the president, and Joe Biden is my president. There's a lot of things I don't like about his policies and people that support his policies, but he is my president, and I respect him.
Thank you. So last question, and you've already sort of touched on this, but this is your opportunity to set the record straight. During this campaign, has there been any information that's come out about you, and if applicable, your voting record, either by your opponent or by another source, that you would like to have the opportunity to clarify here this evening?
Absolutely. I don't have Bloomberg money. I don't have Wall Street money. I don't have $6 million in the bank and a personal wealth that is excessive. I'm Paul DeGroot. I was a public sector employee prosecutor. I won the primary, and I won it by going to the people. I didn't get the party line. I didn't get the party line in Morris County. I didn't get the party line in Essex County. If you know Jersey politics, and I think everybody here probably knows Jersey politics because we're from Jersey, you get the party line, you get the top position. And I didn't win the top position, but I decided, even though I didn't get the top position in those two counties, I was going to run to the primary because I believed I can help. My opponent has lied about me, and she's lied. I am not against the woman's right to choose. She's lied. I have said, I have on audio on my phone right now that I said in an interview, I'm for exceptions. There are supporters, which I have on my phone right now, which my opponent has taken photos with, campaigned with, and been endorsed by. And on my phone, those supporters are Mikey Sherrill supporters. And they said to me after I came out with the press conference, we never knew you were so reasonable on the abortion pro-life issue. And that wasn't a joke or sarcasm. They thought I was reasonable. I would ask Mikey Sherrill whether she thinks they're lying, those are her friends, or I'm lying. I'm not lying. I'm pro-choice. I believe in a woman's right to choose. I'm compassionate to that decision. It's an important decision, and I want to be part of my daughter's life. Second, SALT relief, SALT, state and local taxes. My opponent promised that, and when she first ran, I will get you SALT tax relief. The Trump and the Republican Party, they did away with it. They came up with a tax plan. It's benefited a lot of people, but Jersey cares about SALT. High tax states care about SALT. In 2018, she ran on it. In 2020, she ran on it, and she never got it through. When you own the presidency, and when you own the Senate, and when you own the House, and I say own, it's one party rule, and you can't get a bill passed, then you're failing at your job. And SALT was a failure. In 2022 now, it has not passed. The Inflation Reduction Act is part of it, and it's not going to reduce inflation, by the way. And there's a lot of surplus. When I go to Congress, I want a clean bill. I don't want all these riders on these bills. The Inflation Reduction Act is flawed, and it could be done better. With Mikey Sherrill, she had said, "Oh, I'll get it now in December." I don't know what's the holdup. When you own all three branches, you should be able to put that bill through. I will stick my heels in and work for CD11, just like other people like Joe Manchin fought for West Virginia. I'll fight for CD11. If it's benefiting CD11, then it's good for me. And if the voters of CD11 said they want it, then I will get it for them. So those are two examples I would like to say, is that she has said she's misled many people on vicious and brutal ads time and time again on my position on choice. And she has said that I was against SALT. I have been campaigning from the very beginning on SALT, and that I was for it. And she says, I'm against it, but now she's for it. Well, if she's for it, she should have got it done, and she didn't.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time and being with us this evening.